Township Historic Preservation Commission, and thank you for coming out today. Many of you know Carla Cielo. After all, she's been documenting barns in the township for 24 years now. Today we'll find out what we've discovered through that study and maybe a few things that we didn't discover. Carla has a master's degree in historic preservation from Columbia University. She is currently conducting research for a series of books on barn outbuildings. And thank you for sharing your barns with us, otherwise none of this would have been possible. Carla, it's up to you.
We had a little technical difficulties because of the cord. So this is on PowerPoint, and I did mine on my Apple, so there might be some slide that didn't work right, but we'll see how it goes. So the Barns of Holland Township is 24, 25 years of research. We started in 1999. We surveyed 81 barns, 10 ruins, and 6 sites. And of those, we can break them down into 3 categories. There's ground barns, bank barns, and modern barns. And you guys all know this. So Holland Township, you think that there was a Dutch barn. There's no classic Dutch barns in Holland Township. So the 81 barns, they represent a little more than half of the barns that were standing in Holland Township that we assume. There was 170 farms in Holland Township in 1880 on the agricultural census. So we assume that there was 170, at least 170 main barns. And so the survey barns represent about half, a little more than half. So we have 25 ground barns. So a ground barn just means that there isn't a basement. And they have from 2 to 8 bays, and a 3-bay ground barn is the most common of this type. And you can tell on the exterior where the bays are. This was on Stevens Road. It still is there on Stevens Road. No, I'm sorry, it's on Hawk Schoolhouse Road. And so this shows the organization of the framings into the bays. So you have the center wagon bay, which in the early days was used for hand thrashing. And then that would be connected to the side bay with what they call a swing beam. And that swing beam ran the full length, so that there's a loft above, so it becomes an uninterrupted space. And then the other side bay had animal stalls. So this is a 3-bay from the 1860 farm map, and you can see on the exterior the 3 bays, just from the layout. And that's the swing beam. So this, again, the center bay and the side was open with a loft above for thrashing. And here they would bring in the wagons and farm equipment, and you guys, a lot of you all farmers know more than me about how the barns were used. So that's the swing beam with the loft above. And this is the side of the barn that had the animal stall. See, that's where we get the problem, because they converted it to PowerPoint so that we get some, that's right. Just ignore that. So this notch is supposed to tell us that there were animal stalls there. We don't have any original stalls in a 3-bay. We do have some that are very old. These are wooden stanchions in a ground barn, but it's not in a 3-bay ground barn. This is gone now. This was at the farm right over here on 519. So you can see the size of these early ground over 3 bays compared to a much larger modern dairy barn. They were very small. They were like 18 by 36, and I think the smallest one is about 16 by 30. And this is a later one. The center wagon doors would have been here. They took them out for windows, but it's still the 3 bays with additions on both ends. So they also would build ground barns larger. This one has 8 bays, so and it's all original. and this is the one that's gonna be, it's gonna be dismantled and moved to another location. So it has 2 hay mounds, it has a wagon entry, which could have been originally for thrashing, even when this was built, they still were doing hand thrashing. There's a loft above, the swing beans here with a loft above, then it had a bay for the cow stanchions, another entry bay, and then the horse stalls. And then on the end was the wagon house.
What's the purpose of a swing beam and what is it?
When we get into framing, I'll tell you more about it. A swing beam spans the full length, and the purpose was to create an uninterrupted space to connect those 2 bays, and then still have a loft above it.
I see.
So it really just supports the loft. Some people say it's to turn the horses around, and there's like a big debate about it, but then other people say you never would bring your horses into the threshing floor because you're mixing poo with wheat. So there's like, how it came about, we don't really know. We don't really know how old they are. They're not in England. There's no swing beams in England. But just through observation, you can see that it's creating a larger space than what would have been, because if there was framing here, then you would be limited to this bay. So it connects that area. We're gonna see it a lot.
Thank you.
So here, you can see this is the swing beam. This is the barn I just showed you down along the river. So that connects the 2 bays. And these are really nice wagon doors. It's a little blurry, but it was all a chamfered oak frame, and then these are the locking mechanisms. And these are the animal stalls. These are still there, and the guy that's going to be dismantling the barn is going to save all these stalls. So that was like one of my big requirements. I'm like, if you're not saving them, I'm going to find a museum that's going to take them, but he's keeping them. And then here's some more. And they have like the holes for the chains to tie them up. And then this is the horse bay, and it had a way of feeding the horses from the wagon bay, so that they didn't have to enter the horse stall area. So the next type, so that was ground barns, this is bank barns, and the only difference really is that it has a basement. And it's usually either built into a bank or it has a ramp to access the upper level. So you have the lower level with the stables and the upper level. The upper level would be access from the bank. This barn was on Church Road, it's no longer standing. But most of our bank barns have a 4-bay. So the 4-bay is this area, and it's the upper part of the barn extends over the basement to shelter the stable doors. This is looking up under the 4-bay. And so basically, if it snowed, you didn't have to shovel the snow to open the door. And this one has a wide ramp to access the upper level. The upper level is where they stored the hay and grain, and the lower level was for the stables. So this one is built into an embankment. This is Crab Apple Hill. It's called a closed 4-bay when the foundation walls wrap around to the front. And most of the 4-bays do not have any posts. They're supported by cantilever, the floor joists. That supported this plate, which supports that wall.
Good question. The bank barns, we had one of those. I found 2 cisterns, one in the bank and one underneath. Is that typical?
Yes. Yeah, they all had cisterns, because you take the roof, runoff and put it into the cistern, and that was the, water for the livestock. And this one is on Ademic Hill Road. It has a beautiful stone line ramp. We know this one was built in 1879 from record, the earlier barn burnt. And so, stone barns, we have 7, of the 4-bay barns, there's 7 are stone. And so here's the 4-bay. In a stone barn, it's like 3/4 is stone, but the 4-bay wall in Holland Township is frame. If it was stone, it would need substantial supports. So it's kind of like a combination stone frame. The lower level of this barn had its original stables. There was basically stalls, and there's always stairs to get to the upper level. This was the house. It had a fire. It's now a ruin. And these are the horse stalls that remain. This is another plan of a basement. It's typical to have the cow stanchions running front to back and the horse stalls on the other end. This is a detail showing how they actually tendoned the stalls into the floor joists, so you know that they were original. If you see like construction that's integral to the framing, they're original. And here's some wooden stanchions, and you know that the side of the barn had horses if you find these pegs let into the stonework. That tells, because that's where you hung your harness, so that tells you that the horses were originally on that side. They didn't keep their horses in box stalls like we do today. They had what are they called? Just stalls. They were like 4-foot wide stalls. They didn't use box stalls. This is a plan of the upper level. The center bay would be for the thrashing. It usually had a granary in the 4-bay area, and then these 2 would be hay mows. All the way to the ceiling. And hay funnels are very common to drop the hay down into the stables, and there's a hay fork to help load. Which I think they came after the 1830s, maybe even later. I don't know. In 1880, Holland Township farmers cultivated between 12 and 215 acres. So they had a lot, these barns had to hold a lot of hay and grain. Here's an interior view. So this is a Sanborn map from 1914. We don't have a lot of original plans from the early 20th century. This is not in Holland Township, but I found it and I thought it was so rare because it really shows how a farm complex was laid out. You had the main barn, and a hovel is an open protective area within the barnyards for the livestock to take shelter if needed. And then there was this straw shed and would be like that so that they can have access. Straw was above and then probably hay for them. There's always a barnyard with an enclosed wall. Here's our cistern, which you mentioned. And then back here was a little frame building for a horse tread power. We've actually seen some of those where the horse would climb up these steps like a workout and power the machinery to thrash the grain. And your father said that they had one, right?
Yeah.
So the farm complex evolved. This is the main barn, and then the 2 wings were probably added later on. This wing was for calves, and this wing was for milking. And there's a milk house that was added. this is the wagon house, this is another wagon house. So it's, the whole farm complex is more than just the main barn. But when doing a study, we focused on the main barn. And this is the same site from the 1860 farm map. That one wing is not shown. The other wing might be this one. So that tells us, this is 1860, tells us that that wing postdates the 1860. Here's just another farm complex, and you can see how, this is probably chicken coops, but how they are built along the barnyard because it's convenient. You already have a wall there, so it can serve as part of the wall for the building. So they economize. And the third type is the modern barns. When these were built, they had between 20 and 40 dairy cows in the lower level and hay storage above. This is on Milo Road. So dating barns with Dendchronology, we dated 15 barns, 9 of which are ground barns and 6 are Pennsylvania 4-bay barns. And so the dendro dating takes out a core of, this is a core, so it's about a quarter inch, 3/8 of an inch core, and then he cuts this in half and sands it down so he can see all of the rings in the wood. This is actually not the full length, it probably was this big. The one end has to have the edge of the tree, the wane of the wood. That's the datum, they have to have that. And they measure the size of the rings and then they compare it to a chronology. We had one guy create our own chronology for the area, and then they can date when the tree fell. We assume that the barn was put up after the tree was taken down. So we've dated some barns where all of the timber is dated to the same time, and then we know that the barn was put up probably that spring. They like to transport timbers in the winter because it was easier by sled over the snow. So this is showing the drilling, and here's more showing the drilling. The last part of the presentation is the results of the dendro dating. So and this just shows that the sample has to have that edge of the tree, the waning edge, the round part. So the questions that we wanted to have answered with the Dendchronology is, we want to know what was the earliest barn, how early are the earliest barns that remain in Holland Township. We were hoping for 17th century, 18th century, not 17th century, 18th century. When did the first Pennsylvania 4-bay bank barn appear in Holland Township? And we also wanted to know the period of use for certain framing techniques, such as, is the wood hewn, or is it sawn, is it circular sawn, things like that. So before we get into what we learned from the Dendchronology, I want to just give you a little bit of a historical background to Holland Township. So the history of Holland Township is tied to Durham Township because of the furnace. Durham had a furnace from 1727. That was the first furnace. And Holland Township is kind of in the crossroads. So this is the area of Holland Township. Sunburn was Milford, and this is the Musconetcong River. So Holland Township was in the crossroad between Durham Furnace and this says Ironworks, and there's Norton Furnace, Auction Furnace, and all along the Musconetcong River were these early forges. I didn't do this research, this is from Peter Rackard. He said there was this is Chelsea Forbes, that's Finesville, he says 1751. Greenwich Forge, 1750, I don't know where he's getting those dates, but, so it's an early iron area. And we have the lime kilns too, so And we do know that there was a ferry early on that connected Holland Township and Durham Township. It was there at least by it was before 1760. This document tells about a tavern that was at the ferry, and they were asking for a renewal of their license in 1760. So that means that the tavern predates 1760 and that the ferry predates 1760. So that just tells us that there were people here. And Durham furnace. So this is not an actual view of Durham furnace, but you loaded it from the top and you loaded the iron ore, limestone, and charcoal. So the limestone was the flux that separated the impurities from the ore, and the charcoal was the fuel, and then you had the bellows that kept the furnace running. So the charcoal is what my interest is here, because Holland Township was all filled with trees in 1730. But the furnace took a lot, took 800 bushels a day to heat the furnace. So the colliers would make the charcoal, they would stack the cordwood. I can't remember if it was 2 cords in a stack, and they'd cover them in leaves, and it smoldered and you made the charcoal. That's actually me making charcoal. And so one collier could man up to 8 of these at a time. So they took down a lot of forest for the furnace, and they were squatters. So they didn't. This is not specific to Holland Township, but they lived in little shacks. And Bob Peabody said that before 1750, the inhabitants were just squatters. So I'm guessing that they were colliers, and they would sell their charcoal to the furnace, and to the forges too, but mostly to Durham furnace. So the landowner was actually from Britain, and by 1750 they're like, oh, there's these squatters living on our land. We need to start collecting rent. So they divided everything up into farms, and they sent an agent to live here to collect rents, yearly rents. Here's where the ferry is, and we have lot number 22 and 23, which we're going to look at further as we go along. So here's a list of tenants. Lot number 22 was owned by John Morris, and lot number 23 was owned by John Thompson. So the British landowner, this is a record that shows that the British landowners actually built barns, and probably houses too, for the tenants. And it says, bill of expenses building a barn on the farm now leads to John Thompson. And we just have in the list, I told you, lot number 23 was rented to John Thompson, so we know exactly what lot it was. It's the lot right across from the river, right down from the ferry. The ferry is right there, right across from Durham Township. And the accounting is very, very interesting, because it tells you that this barn was a frame barn. It definitely was not a log barn. They ordered 2.5 and 1.5 inch planks from Thomas Purcell, boards and scatlings, lath, and weatherboard. So on a log barn, you don't even use weatherboard. They did cutting and hauling, 15 days work, 6 days hauling log timbers with 2 horses, 2 days hauling shingles from Easton, 55 days of board, and 23 meals after raising. So because it's a raising, that tells you that they're raising the frame. So it's a timber frame barn. And they had 3 gallons of rum for the people at the raising. And this continues for the tradesmen's bill, they pay to have an expense for the work of the carpenter, shaving the shingles, masonry work, so it did have some foundation, but probably not a basement. But, they had 2,000 shingles, probably all on the roof, and then blacksmiths for the hinges, for the doors. So in 1790, they started selling farms. That was after the Revolutionary War. They didn't want to have these leases anymore, so they started selling. And the farms, this is the line of the Barker tract, which had the 33 farms in it. This is a Hamilton tract, and there was 85 farms. So the farms sold between 1790 and 1814. And this shows how the farms were later subdivided to get to that. Remember that 170 farms? So they were subdivided into smaller farms by 1860. So, and everybody's seen that the 1860 farm map. We bring it to everybody. So we have that construction specification, but we don't know what the barn looked like. But this is, so lot 22, so the construction specification was at lot 23, so this is the lot above, and this picture shows a barn, and it really looks like, to me, like it's a ground level 3-bay, and there's another one right here. It has the wagon entry doors. It just looks like it has 3 bays, right? Like it just looks like the ground level 3-bay barns. So this, I think it's from about 1800. So this is when he subdivided his farm into smaller farms. And that's where the ferry is. And that's the existing house at the ferry today. And there's just a close-up of what it looked like. So, the framing characteristics of a ground level swing beam barn. So we have the 3 bays. These are the 3 bays, and then the framing is called a bent. So it's a 4 bents in a 3-bay barn. And this is the barn. This is the barn right over here on 519, which was dismantled and moved, and then it's in storage right now by Adam. And so when we look at the characteristics of the frame of a barn, we're looking at the characteristics of the beds that go across. And this barn has the big swing beams. There was only one left. There was another beam up here that came across, but that was cut off by the farmers. So it's these big cambered timbers that are hand-hewn, and they span the full width, and that's characteristic of these ground level 3-bay barns. So here it is in drawing. It's the swing beam measures 20 by 8 in the thickest part, and then the ends are not as thick. That's what the camber means. And here is another barn that you can really see how it's cambered. So that means that it's done by hand, and all components are measured by individually. So as I said, there is no classic Dutch barns in Holland Township, and there's no Dutch frame wagon houses, and we have not found any Dutch framed houses in Holland Township. So how did it get its name? I think that they were naming the Germans by accident, like they were just called Pennsylvania Germans, but that's a different story. So this is a classic Dutch barn. It's in Bergen County. It had a really steep roof. It had a gable end entry. And the interior was organized into 3 bays, but they're aisles because they're running the length along the ridge. So it had the center aisle with a big anchor beam and 2 side aisles for the animal stalls. And the hay would go above. And this is the verdieping. That's a Dutch term that measures the drop between the plate and the tie beam. So in our swing beam barns, the only thing that looks similar to a Dutch barn is the character of the swing beam and that verdieping. They always have that drop. So the floor plan, with the side entry and the 3 bays, is definitely an English plan. And that's why they're often called English barns. But as I said, there's no swing beams in England. So the frame may have Dutch influence. So it's possible that when these British landowners hired the timber framers, that they hired Dutch framers, and they came up with this American barn that's a hybrid of Dutch and English. So I take out the ethnic association in the name of, I'm gonna take this off, this is good. Just a second. So I just call them the ground level 3-bay barns. I don't call them English barns. I don't call them Dutch barns. But John McFarland, he's deceased now, he said that a melding of ethnic traditions in timber framing occurred by 1750. So I think these barns are proof that melding that did occur. Again, I can't prove that this is what the tenant barns look like. We were trying to prove it with the Dendchronology, but that's just my guess. So these barns had raising holes, and so did the Dutch barns. They have raising holes too. Then they also have 2-foot scribe marks. It's faint, but there's a line here and a circle around it, and that was measured from 2 feet from the line to the outside face of the post. It's how they measured. It means that it's a scribe rule barn. And this is a drawing of it. So you got the line with the circle around the line, and that, I've measured a lot of them. They're always 2 feet from the outside on the post. And this is another level line this is the top of the post, and that's the plate where the rafter would sit, and this is a level line. So these are scribe rule characteristics. So as the framing of the swing beam bed evolved, they added long braces that helped the posts, because the rafters would put on pressure on the post, and the long passing brace helped stop the outward thrust of the rafters. And they added struts. So the framing evolved. And this is a later one, by 1900, the swing beams were incorporated into a truss. But they still were using them. So it's interesting, because if we think that they were to help hand thrashing, they still were building swing beams in 1900, and they weren't hand thrashing anymore. So it had a continued use. We're thinking it's just to turn the equipment around, but we don't know for sure. So if there's any farmers that can remember from 1900, please let me know. So the characteristics of the ground level 3-bay barns, they have the heavy cambered timbers for the swing beam that evolved into a truss, substantially dropped tie beams first in all 4 bunts and later in just the center 2 bunts, raising holes, and 2-foot scribe marks. So then we have the Pennsylvania 4-bay, and this barn type first appeared in Lancaster, Pennsylvania around 1750. So, the settlers came from Lancaster and then moved to Bucks County, Upper Bucks County. And then the next generation came over to Holland Township and also to Warren County. So these new settlers brought their own builders and their own construction techniques. The builders had a completely different background. And they also probably brought the log houses. I don't think we had log houses before about 1800. And this is a stone section. This is the log house. There's a big, huge stone chimney on the end, and then a frame addition. You can see a pond back there. The pond can help locate the house, but I don't have it exactly located. I've been told it was on Winebury Hill, of Winebury Lane. And this is another photo of, this is a stone house, a stucco stone house with a log. The log is the original, and then the stone was added. This one I do know where it is. It's on Denver Hill Road. It was by Bob Billy's house. They just took the stucco off this section. And in place, there's a late Victorian addition in place. So the log sections were taken down pretty early, like still in the 19th century. So the new settlers that came from Pennsylvania, their framing methodology was much lighter. It is better engineered. It had a assemblage of larger timbers that are much smaller in cross section. There's no oversized cambered tie-beams, and instead of relying on mass, they relied on they engineered the framing assembly.
What was the purpose of that ladder? Was that to get to hay? Did they have hay up there?
Yeah. This is the center aisle, and that's a hay mound.
Okay.
Yeah, this rock type always had a ladder incorporated into the frame.
So let me ask you, what happened to the floor where you put the hay? It's all gone?
No.
Didn't quite make that out.
It went. See, this is a mouse cell wall. So that held the hay so that the hay did not come onto the thrashing floor, but the hay just went all the way up.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This is another stone barn, and the interior of this, that's the hay mound this side, this is the thrashing floor on this side, and the framing is just light timbers. And here's another with that framing. This is on Fox Pool House. I don't know if it's still standing. The house burned down. After the house burned down. And this is the interior view with very light framing that's an assemblage of many smaller components. This is on Crabapple Hill. And here's some drawings that show the framing. And this is icons on River Road. And this one actually has a date. It says 1858. I don't know if it's true. We didn't designate this one. Sometimes dates terms are right, but sometimes they just wanted to carve their name. So in summary, the construction methodology of a Pennsylvania 4-bay barn, it has an assemblage of lighter timbers. The upper tie beams are either framed into the plate or the post. There's no raising holes. There's no two-fish scribe marks. There's no swing beams. It does have marriage marks, but you can see how different they are. So this barn kind of really helps to understand the story. It's a 4-bay barn. it's a little different than the other Pennsylvania 4-bay barns that we saw. And the first giveaway is the fact that it has posts. The 4-bay has posts. So this barn is framed just like a ground barn. It has the big heavy timbers, it has a swing beam, it has 2-foot scribe marks, it has beams are cambered. So it's like the local people saw this 4-bay barn form and then copied it. But they used the old timber framers, they used the timber framers that they had. And so this is a melding of then 3 ethnics. Because you've got the form, remember we said the other one was a combination of maybe Dutch and English, and now we got the form of a Pennsylvania German barn. And this is what the frame looks like. So it basically looks like a ground level 3-bay barn just put on a foundation with a 4-bay. Here's just some details. And then, just like in a ground barn, the swing beam evolved into a truss. And even our 1879 barn, this is where the log house was associated with this barn. Even in 1879, they still, if they wanted a swing beam, then it was incorporated into a truss. So it's an evolution. And here's another view. So we have, of the Pennsylvania 4-bay barns, we have an equal number of barns with a light Germanic frame and an equal number of barns with a heavy timber swing beam frame. Just about all, except for this one, but all of the stone barns are located on the other side of the Musconettown Mountain. This is the Musconettown Mountain range right here. And all of the ground barns, are located where the soil was actually better. There are some over there, but it's just, I didn't chart them all, but the Germans would buy the cheaper land and they would work harder. So I don't know. That's just and then some people that had a ground barn actually kept the frame and they put it back up. So this is the frame of a ground barn. They probably dismantled it and they put it back up on a foundation with a 4-bay. So they reused the farm. And this is the late 1800s that they're doing this. And here's the inside. So you can see you have the big heavy timbers. This is part of the original ground barn. And then they added the whole purlin frame to support the larger roof. And they added the 4-bay and they put it over a foundation. We have 7 of these reused ground barns. Okay, so the Dendchronology results. The first question that we wanted to ask is, how early are the oldest remaining barns? And we wanted to know, are there any barns remaining from the tenant period? So this is one of our, we thought this was going to be one of our earliest barns. This was the Galloway farm right over here on the corner of Church Road and 519. This picture is from 1965. So this is the oldest section within extensions. The wagon houses remain today, but the barns are gone. And it was right here, in the center of Spring Mills. The person that bought the property is the first purchaser. William Goodley bought it in 1790, and he built a mill. This is a later mill. He built an early one. There's still the ruins still there. and he built a stone house that has a 1792 date. So this is the barn that we thought he built, and it has, we've already seen these drawings. It has it's just 2 tie beams, the swing beams and 1 beam, so it's the simplest method of construction. And here's the view, and so the upper beam was removed. It dated to 1794, so it's not from the tenant period. It's just after he purchased it. Actually, he sold the property in 1793, so it was the person that bought it after him. This is another barn that we thought could be from the tenant period. This is the barn. The house is not that old, but within there is still the framing with just the 2 tie beams. And the end framing has gunstock posts, which are English, and it is a detail that came directly from England. Here, so we got really excited when we saw this, because there's the gunstock post. So that means that they made the top of the post wider, so that it can accommodate this this plate, which is dropped down into the post. So they needed more mass so that they could put this on top. This is actually notched over. So there's the detail in the drawing. And it also dates to 1794. So it's after the farms were purchased. This is the Silva property on Church Road, and within it is an early 3-bay ground barn with a swing beam. So it's still on the same lot number 5 purchased by Goodley, but it's up here. So it's still the Springville's property. And the house, the earliest section of the house had just 1 room, winder staircase, and a cook hearth. The cook hearth was later turned to the larder, but it originally had a cook hearth and just 1 room and probably the 2nd floor. So the swing beam is 17 by 9.5. It has just 2 non-connected tie beams, but these braces were added. So we thought that this couldn't be earlier because they added the braces, and we were right. Here's that detail. This brace was taken out and replaced with metal, but it remains there. And this barn has these nice fancy rafter ends. And it was built in 1803. This barn, we've seen this already. It has, now we incorporated a strut into the framing. And its swing beam measures 19.5 by 7.5. We dated this barn twice. The floor joist dated to 1787, which is from the tenant period, but I said, Larry, we're gonna have to date this again because I don't believe it's 1787, because the framing, it looks newer than our 1794 barns, because it is more evolved. So we redated it, because the first time we only dated the floor joist, so that doesn't work. You have to spread out the samples. And so then we came up with a date of 1804. And so when did the 4-bay barn type first build? Was first built in Holland Township. This one is in Finesville. It's on track lease to Leffler Thompson and sold to Philippine in 1797. And he was the son of a German immigrant that came through Philadelphia in or about 1751. So the family had been in North America for several generations, and he operated a flour and sawmills on the Musconetcong River. So this is it has the light Pennsylvania German framing, no swing beam. There's the view, and it was built in 1805, which is very early for that size of a barn, and it's very early for that migration all the way from Lancaster. It was previously thought that this barn type didn't come to New Jersey until 1825. So this is, that was pretty conclusive that when we got that date. This is another, this is a Pennsylvania bank barn, and inside, we just saw that, inside has the reused ground barn. And so this barn looks identical to the one that dated 1804, and it dates 1806. This is another house that's dated. It has a 1792 date stone in the basement. So we were hoping an early barn. There's a bank barn that has an 1883 date by Apgar, A. Apgar. But within it is the reused frame of an earlier ground barn. So this is the reused part, and they added the roof support, the purlin of the roof support, and they added the forebay, and they put it on a new foundation. So we were after the date of the ground barn, but there's two struts, and there is the braces. So we thought this was an evolved frame, so it came up with a 1809 date. So it does show the progression really does correspond to the dates that we're coming up with. This one is in Buns Valley. It actually has 4 bays and a house, and it has a beautiful spring house. And now we finally are seeing the long passing braces, which are stronger than the short knee braces. And it dates to 1812. And our barn that is a Pennsylvania bank barn form, but with a swing beam and the earlier framing technology. So how long did it take the local people to catch on to the fact that the bank barn is a more convenient farm for farming? It gives them more space in the same amount of area. And this barn, here's the framing, was built in 1821. So it took about 16 years for the local people to start building the 4-bay barns. This is the Phillips barn on Amsterdam Road. There's an addition here now, but within here is also an earlier barn. We dated this one twice also. So the earlier barn was just a 2-bay. It was not a bank barn, it was a ground barn. It was just like this barn that used to be on Church Road. So it did not have a 4-bay. And then they added a bay and they added a 4-bay. And the framing, it has a light dramatic frame, so there's no swing beam. And instead of the scribe marks, it has red pencil lines. That's just showing the, oops, did we get the date? Well, we lost the date on that. It's 1824, and then the rebuilt one is 1844. We didn't date this one, but it's a stone barn up on 519 with a date stone, and that says 1824. That's 1824, but this is a huge barn. The Cravicle Hill barn, we've seen this before. It has the same framing as the the barn in Pinesville, and it dates to 1825. And that's just a detail of the plate. This is the barn on the river that's coming down now. The 8-bay brown barn with the swing beam. So all of and this was the house is not there anymore. It's a Greek revival house. It's the largest swing beam in the township. It's made, the whole barn is vertically sawn hemlock, but the last 5 feet of the beams are hand hewn because the sawmill wasn't long enough for the width of the barn, so they all had to be hewn at the end. The wood was floated downriver from upstate. There's evidence of that. Like, I think these holes are evidence of that. All the posts have raising holes. There's 2-foot scribe marks on the swing beam. The swing beam's cambered. And as I said, it's the biggest swing beam in the township. And here's the drawing, and it dates to 1832.
Do you know where that's going to be reconstructed?
He's gonna put it on his property.
Local?
He wants it for himself.
Is it local?
I don't know where he is. Where? I think Warren County. So this is, on Hawksville House, the house that burnt down, and the woman, I think, died in the fire too. That was tragic, but the house has a date of 1832, so I'm assuming that the barn dates to the same period, but we did not date this. This is next door on Church Road. And here's some nice old photos. That's Church Road in, I think, late 30s. And you can see the ruts in the road. I think those are the ruts. And here's the barnyard in the 4-bay. So it has a light Pennsylvania German farm frame, but the posts were cut off and they put in a swing beam. So they evidently, the use of a swing beam, they thought it was useful. So they added it in their Pennsylvania German frame barn. The swing beam we couldn't date, it didn't come up with a date, but it was built in 1838. And this is the Van Sickle barn in Buzz Valley. This is the 1965 view. This is the view when we first surveyed it in 2001. It was abandoned, and the fate was not, we weren't sure of the fate, but today it's beautifully restored. And it has a swing beam that's 16 by 8, and it was built in 1841. So our last try to find something that was built in the tenant period was this barn, and it was in that lot 22 across from Durham, and so it's actually right here. And there was a 3-bay barn on this map, so I don't know, could that barn have been it? So this is on the John Bloom farm. So yeah, so here's where the picture of that barn is about right here, and that's about where the barn is. So, and it has a lot of reused timbers. It has, so here's a reused plate. You can see it's reused because of the notches for the rafters. The swing beam is reused. You can see how this is a different type of wood than this. There's reused pieces all over the place. And there's actually reused pieces from 2 barns. And so here's a detail, and that's Larry looking for reused pieces. Unfortunately, the dendrochronologist could not date any of these reused pieces. So we could not determine if this was from the tenant period. But this L, we were able to date, and it has interesting framing because it has a very low tiding, and it does look like that Dutch characteristics with the cambered framing. But it dated to 1841. So we did not find anything older than 1794. But by dating this, it does show that the same type of framing continued for a long time. So in summary, the Dendchronology barns date from 1794 to 1841. The timber frame barns were built between 1794 and 1941. And the documented barns range from 1794 to 1961. Prior to the early 1800s, the landscape was dotted by ground barns and continued to be the traditional framing started by the British landowners and the tradesmen that they hired. Beginning by about 1906, and certainly by the 1830s, the landscape radically changed by the Pennsylvania four-bay barn type, which dwarfed the ground barns. So since 1999, we've lost 14 barns, at least 4 wagon houses, chicken coops, and several other barns have fallen into ruin. So this is a quote from A Living Color. You can tear a building down, but you can't erase the memory. These, used to say, these barns that are falling down, they have a value that you can't see. So this is the first. This is from 1929. It's a view from that was taken by the power plant when the power plant first opened. This is probably early 50s. This is when we surveyed the barn, and this is today. So the quote is not really accurate because preserving the memory really actually takes work. And sometimes the documentation and photographs and drawings are really the only way that we can preserve these barns because they do disappear. This is just the funding sources and to thank you all. Open Doors to History. Without your help, without allowing us to come to your property, maybe sometimes 4 to 5 times, we never would have learned any of this. So thank you. There was only 3 farms in the township where we got no's. And we're still watching one for her move. That's it. Any questions?
Carla, I assume these people, when they came here, they built the kind of barn that they built in the old country, and they were coming here from Europe.
Well,
and so,
no.
no, that's not a safe assumption?
That's what everybody thinks, but no, because they didn't have swing beams in England. They had the ground level 3-bay barns. They were mostly built in stone in England. So no, these are American barns. They change when they come across the river. They change. I mean, across the ocean. they change. The Pennsylvania German barns. Ed Sminger did a lot of work on that. He went to like Switzerland, I think. He found the prototype with Switzerland. But there's one type that we don't have here. It's with a pent roof instead of a 4-bay, and they're trying to call that the English Lake District barn. That came from England. Well, it didn't. I think that form came from here and went there. So there, it's not, everything doesn't always come from Europe and go here. We also send forms back to there. But yeah, our ground level 3-bay barns are American. They're American barns.
So which one was the very oldest barn?
The one, right over here, at Spring Mills at 1794, and the other one is on 519.
Oh, Kenny's, the old Kenny?
No,
Oh,
it's, how do you describe where it is?
10519?
Yeah,
It's between Melford and Mount Pleasant, closer to Mount Pleasant on the right-hand side.
oh, going
Okay.
that way, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
you can't tell
It's a
from the
white
outside.
barn,
Yeah.
it's right across from what used to be a Christmas tree farm.
I think the siding is early 20th century, so you can't tell.
Why do some of the old houses have two front doors?
So we also document houses. The one door led into the kitchen, which had a big cooktop. The other door led into the parlor. So because these houses are vernacular, they're not built with a center hall. So you didn't want to take the company through the kitchen, so they had two doors. If you had a center hall house, then you only need one door, because they could go through the.
And sometimes the kitchen was the only part that was built first, the
Yeah,
kitchen
but-
with a bedroom above,
We never found that.
the house that I,
Your house is all the same.
okay, because.
That's one house. Because, people love that, love that story, to show that the house evolved. But when we look at it, especially with a stone house, the kitchen part is missing a wall. You would needed to have a wall there. But the wall goes straight up and supports the roof of the main section. So, we think they're built all at the same time, usually. It's just rare. In the pictures I showed with the log house, yes, those were built first and then they built the stone section on. But mostly by 1833, your house is from 1833, they were building the whole house with the kitchen and the formal section.
It's rumors.
I was always told that the barn next to me, which was built in 1863 or 4, was built with the style of a keel of a ship. You know, it turned upside down, from the keel of the ship would be this way, and it was a style of building.
You mean the wagon house that's there? The wagon house that's next to the
The
barn?
big barn.
The big barn's a ship? Well, no, that's 1841 it was built.
18 what?
1841.
41?
Yeah, we dated it.
Well, it's got a sign on it that said 1863.
That's the wagon house that has a date,
Okay, well, that's the one that has
the hull of the ship.
they told me it was like a keel of a ship. Upside down. And that was the style of building.
I don't know anything about it.
When you cross the Musconetcon from Finesville, cross that bridge, that farm there, do you know anything about that farm?
On the
This
Holland
big stone
side?
house with the farm.
That's in 1805, that stone barn, that's our earliest Pennsylvania 4-bay barn.
Okay, because my grandparents owned that farm in the 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh,
Sold,
okay.
I think, in the 60s. William C. Apcar, his name was.
Oh, okay. Wow, so that's before, what was it, the Dragosas? No, Bellas. The person that sold it in like 1999 we met.
Yeah, I don't know who he sold it to. He sold it in the 60s,
Oh, okay.
early 60s.
Okay.
But I don't know who he sold it to.
Do you have pictures?
Excuse me?
Do you have pictures?
No. Unfortunately.
When you refer to the tenant period, was that when there was the squatters and the land was being, what is the tenant period that you refer
The
to?
tenant period after the squatters, they cleaned it up. They kicked the squatters off. They said, well, you're gonna stay, you're gonna pay rent.
Okay,
But the landowner built barns for them,
and that was in the.
1750 to
70s.
1790.
Thank you.
questions?